Please welcome the party wreckers, Matt Brown and Sam Davis.
Well, guys, before we jump into the meat and potatoes of what we're going to talk about today, I want to preface, if you are a family with a loved one or a family member of a loved one who's struggling with addiction, you will probably get your toes stepped on today with what we're going to talk about. It's not malicious. It's not meant to be hurtful, but we are going to talk about some experiences that Sam and I have had recently with families. And we really haven't addressed this specifically or as directly as I think we're going to address it today. But before we do this, we do want to talk about something that we have been providing on Intervention on Call every Thursday night for the last, 6 months. We started doing this back in January, right?
It was actually before January, around the holidays, when you started this, and it's a free family support group virtually for any families that just need some coaching or some support from other family members and from folks that run it. We keep it solution based because just like the rooms of AA, NA, CA, and all these 12-step fellowships, some meetings can be hit or miss. You can go to some meetings and it'll be some watered down, middle of the road stuff, about just don't drink no matter what. Some of the Al-Anon can appear as that they're just griping about their loved one and they don't seem to be in the solutions. I had that with several families that I worked with over the last several months. One right after the other was saying, well, I've been to Al-Anon. It just seemed like excuse my language, a bitch fest. Just seems stuck in the problem. I'm like, yeah, well, you go to enough Al-Anon, you're going to find a good one. You got to find your tribe. But that's not very helpful when you're desperate and you need some solution. Lack of power is your dilemma and you needed it yesterday. Bouncing around from meeting to meeting can be frustrating. People can lose steam. So you had this idea of let's put a virtual family support group together. We use our social media outlets to promote it, let people know about it. And they get on Zoom at 8 o'clock on Thursday evening, Eastern time. And sometimes, we have 8, sometimes we have 14.
It's been nice when the meetings are bigger. Just because more people get to participate, I think we can help more people. But even for those that don't want to talk, just to listen to some of the feedback we give families on their current situation can be helpful to those that just want to listen. We've got some regulars that come back every single week, and we've got some new people now joining us every week. And I think for those families that, number one, hey, I don't know if I need an intervention. I don't know if I want to work with an interventionist. I've heard some pretty negative things about intervention. People are telling me that it's something I ought to look into, but I'm not so sure. Come and talk with an interventionist for free on Thursday nights, and we will treat this just as best we can as far as, giving you direct solutions for direct problems. And like Sam says, we try to keep it solution based. And we want to make sure if people are going to give us an hour of their time on a Thursday night that we're going to give them everything we got.
Even if they're not even considering an intervention or not at that point yet, or even if they've already done one and their loved one's in treatment, it is good to have some support to where you don't feel like you're alone.
Well, and not just to hear that it's happening to other people, but to get some feedback on, okay, well, if this is happening to you, how do you deal with it?
I have been on the family support groups now. Like you said, we've been doing them a while. I can see the results in them. If I miss a couple of family groups, whatever reason, and I come back, plug back in, like I can see the growth in these families and these individuals, from the 2 weeks prior.
And the ones that are regulars, the ones that where we're seeing that growth are the ones typically whose loved ones, there's a couple of them who have loved ones who are in treatment currently. There's one that has a son who's been out of treatment now for several months and he's doing really, really well. And she's just trying to work on herself right now. And, we've got a lot of regulars that show up, but they've already kind of been through that front end process and they've been able to provide some great feedback. We can just kind of sit back and let other families talk sometimes because they've got that perspective of, yeah, my son was there, my daughter was there.
It's when the families take over and are supportive to one another. And just like you said, there's the ones that have been a little further down the road. We're able to give some good feedback. It works. Family support groups work. You're asking your loved one to basically stop breathing air. When you're asking them to put down drugs and alcohol, it's what it's like to them is just, asking them to stop breathing. And then you're asking them to go off to a strange place and do all of this work, engage in 12 steps, go to treatment with a bunch of strangers. You're asking a lot of your loved one that they need to do, rightfully so. You're asking your loved one these things and expecting them to do this and embrace this and take it on full steam. But you won't go to a support group yourself. You're unwilling to do the work yourself. You're unwilling to do the work that you need to do. It's pretty selfish, actually, quite selfish, and it's unrealistic.
Well, and that takes us right to the topic that we wanted to talk about on today's episode. And so, what we're talking about families maybe not necessarily embracing the solution in the same way that we're asking their loved ones to do. I think both of us in the last week or two have had some experiences where we've identified in the families that we're working with that their loved ones really aren't the ones who need the most immediate help. And even though they're the ones in active addiction, it's not even time to address that until we address some of the behaviors within the family. What are you finding on your end? What are some of the experiences that you've had this week or in the last couple of weeks that have kind of brought this to the forefront for you?
This person that OD'd twice within a week and got a DUI. Among the family dynamic, like he needs to be somewhere safe. They need to be somewhere getting some work done like 3 days ago, 4 days ago. But the most critical piece in my eyes at this moment is one of the parents, because they're in some serious delusion. They seem to think, based on no experiences, based on no experience, based on no knowledge, based on nothing but a feeling that drove a thought, and that feeling is fear. And it's self-centered fear on top of that. It's all self-centered fear. It says that, well, he may can do IOP, or they may can do IOP. He may go to a 12-step meeting. They've agreed to that, to go to a 12-step meeting twice a week. I'm like, you almost lost your loved one, like twice in a week, twice. And they got some legal trouble. Do you have an experience that shows you that what you're saying is so? It's important to go by what do your experiences show you rather than what your head is telling you. And I'm seeing far and wide across the board here, everybody's operating on what their head is telling them instead of what their experience has been showing them. I see this all over social media. Well, I just keep praying for my loved one. I just keep praying. That's giving you an out of the action. You're giving it up to God and you're saying, I'm just praying. It's, I'll be willing to pray. That's the action I'm willing to take. Is just say some prayers. But it's time to put some legs to those prayers.
The common denominator in what I hear you explaining and what I've been experiencing, especially recently, is fear. The family doesn't want to confront their own fear around the relationship, around the reaction that the person is going to have. I talked with a family on Monday on Intervention on Call. They have a 16-year-old. In most states, somebody who's a minor is not given the same ability to choose as an adult. Although here in the Pacific Northwest, in both Washington and Oregon, the legal age of consent for medical is 14 years old. And so from the time that they're 14 years old, they get to make their own medical choices, which means mom and dad have zero influence. Like they can't go into a medical appointment with their child unless the child signs a HIPAA release and gives them consent.
Show me the individual or group of individuals that came up with that idea or were presented with that idea, and they collectively, there's a group of people out here that collectively shook their head yes and said, oh yeah, you know what, I think that may be a good idea.
Look no further than the webpage for the Oregon State Legislature and the Washington State Legislature and the Office of the Governor, who ultimately signed off on that brilliant idea. I'm talking to this family, and it's very clear to me that they are really seeing the crisis for what it is. Like this young man has been in the emergency room 3 times in the last 2 months for alcohol poisoning, for cough syrup overdoses. Like he was delusional and hallucinating because he had drank too much cough syrup with the intention of, trying to get high. He's going to the grocery store and shoplifting booze. And anytime the family wants to talk to him about getting some help, he erupts. Just a violent, not physically violent, but verbally just lets them have it, won't let them speak. He screams them down. They're on the phone or on the video with me going, okay, so how do we address this? The first thing I said is, why are you afraid of a 16-year-old son? What's going on here? What's going on with you guys that you're so afraid of his reaction? In a very literal way, they were being held hostage by their child. And he knew it. He knew exactly, because he's got a brother living there in the house with him, an older brother. And he'll joke around with his brother like, I got mom and dad wrapped. I can get away with anything here. And he's going back to his mom and dad. The older brother's going, well, guys, he knows he's doing this to you. What's going on? And as I'm talking to them, just really trying to help them understand, like, guys, you have more authority as parents than you're allowing yourself to have. And as soon as you allow this fear to evaporate, all of this problem loses its control in your home the minute you stop being afraid of it. You can approach your son and say, I love you too much to let you talk to me like this. I love you too much to let you avoid this conversation with me. When you're ready to have this conversation, I'm happy to turn your phone back on. I'm happy to give you the PlayStation back. I'm happy. Like, all of this stuff needs to go away. They were so reluctant to do it. You know, at the end of that conversation, they were like, so can you know, a lot of what you're saying sounds really good. Can you just come have this conversation with him? And I said, you know, I can, but you're not ready for what comes next. Because if what comes next, if I'm going to come in and do an intervention, what comes next is some action. And that action doesn't mean anything unless you're behind it. If there's boundaries that need to be put in place, if those boundaries aren't your boundaries, they don't mean anything. Because if I get up and walk out of the house, the things that are wrong are going to go right back to being wrong. They might be right for an hour. We might get his attention for an hour or 2 hours or 5 hours. But at the end of that conversation, if he knows I really don't have to make a change here, because I know at the end of the day, as soon as this jackass is out of my living room, I can go back to running the show. There's not going to be anything that changes. This is the part that I think when I, you know, at the very beginning, when I talked about stepping on families' toes, like, it's not intentional, but I'm seeing this way too commonly, that parents in particular of 18, 19, 16, you know, young adults in particular, they're so afraid of the reaction that they're going to get that it prevents them from taking appropriate action in the first place.
What's their fear? Were they able to identify what their fear was?
They're afraid of conflict. They're afraid of the conflict. They're not sure how to handle the conflict when it happens. And that's what he uses to control the dynamic, is immediately, that's his go-to move, is I'm going to fight with you.
You know, and that's happening everywhere, all over the place. And the only way I see out of it is the families, they have to change. The families have to be educated. Every interventionist, every coach, everyone that is in our space should be so freaking busy, 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, that we can't do it all. The people saying, hey, what do I do? How do we do this? What do we do? And they're not. I had a family. This individual has lost limbs, no limb, can't point, right? Can't even point to the problem because of his actions. And that's the best this guy can bring to the table. That's the best he can muster given the condition that he's in emotionally and mentally at this point. And they want to get his, just want to talk. But it's really quite simple. Just call it what it is. It's a level of insanity. And even I see professionals falling into that trap with letters behind their name so long you need like 3 or 4 business cards, so many letters behind their name, fall into that trap. Well, they need to be presented with such and such, and they need to be told of this and that, and we can, and then we got to leave it up to them. Dude, they're fucking insane, man. And the most insane thing they do sober. It's that simple. It's that simple. They can return to sanity, and that's why I'm so open about calling them insane. It's like, because I know you can return to sanity. I know. But why in the hell are you sitting around waiting on the insanity of your loved one to just go away? They just rouse themselves from their lethargy and assert their power of will, as the literature says.
It's that fear. It's that fear of, number one, not knowing how to have that conversation in a way that doesn't invite conflict, or that you know how to handle that when it comes up. But the other thing is just the fear of, what if they get mad at me? What if they stop talking to me? What if I create a separation that can't be repaired later on? That's the fear that I run into more than anything, and that keeps people stuck, is I don't want to hurt their feelings. When I talk to families, it's like the feelings that people have are the most flexible part of this entire equation. Feelings are never permanent, ever. I could be offered something that I really don't want one day, and then I go and I have a different experience, and all of a sudden that opportunity looks a little bit more attractive. I think families are oftentimes looking at, what are they willing to do versus what do they need to do? And not that we ever want to present this to somebody saying, you need to do this. The needs are going to stay pretty constant. My needs, if I'm in active addiction, my needs are not going to change from one day to the next. My feelings will. I mean, that's what's out of control in the first place, is how I feel and my inability to deal with it. And families get stuck in this idea of, but they're going to feel bad. They're going to feel ambushed. They're going to feel, criticize. They're, whatever that is, it's like, okay. But the net result could be that their life gets saved and they go on and they actually learn how to manage the things that are unmanageable to them right now. And they get to go out and have a wonderful life. And they thank you for it.
I had a lady today. She was like, well, man, I don't even know where to look. Treatment. Like, I don't know what he's willing to do. I said, well, hold up. Let's set him to the side right now. Set him completely to the side. Because you haven't even approached him and you're already in negotiations with his illness. You're not even in the same house right now. You're not even in the same town. You're in a different town. He came see, and you're already starting to negotiate with the illness. Find a place that you feel would be the best fit for your loved one. You ask a lot of questions. I gave her the questions asked. Pretend he can't feel right now. All he can do is sit there and listen. That's it. That's all he can do. He can't respond. Can't do anything. Set him aside. That's dangerous. It's very dangerous.
Yeah, it is. And you and I deal with this all the time where families kind of get into this game of mental chess where they're trying to think 2 and 3 and 4 moves ahead. Well, if I do this, then they're going to say this. And so I'm going to have to approach it this way. And then they're going to do this. And so I'm going to have to do this. And then this is going to happen. And all of a sudden it's like, well, I'm never going to be able to do this because they're thinking 10 steps down the line instead of just going, okay, this is what really should be happening right now. How do I take this step?
Large part of what we do is slowing them down.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it, Matt? Would you agree? Large part of this process that we do is keeping them step by step. They've hired me to do an intervention or even before they've hired me to do an intervention. And then talking about, well, what are we going to do when he gets out of treatment?
Yeah.
I'm like, let's we're not there yet. I love your enthusiasm.
Yeah.
But let's slow down a little bit, step by step. I got this family that, they book a session and it's like, all right, your marching orders. I don't say that, but you're like, this is all you do for right now. This is your next step. Let's do this because they'll get carried away. And I get it. I mean, it's all fear driven. I even like to ask families, all right, let's explore this fear. He's going to be mad at me or she's going to be mad at me. They're going to hate me. Okay. If I say this, then they're going to do that. I'm all right. Well, let's say they do that. What happens? Then what? It's always a famous one for me is like the then what? Well, let's go all the way with it. Then what?
And the reality
it
is
fizzles out. It fizzles out. It's like there's no ending. It just fizzles.
And it's just human nature. We want to envision what the worst case scenario is so that we're not crushed if it happens. But those worst case scenarios are very, very rare because the person that we are really wanting to find, that wonderful, loving, kind, generous, funny person is still in there. If we can reach that person, which is typically pretty successful, like we get in there and we talk to the real person and we try to get the addiction out of the way and really touch that person and touch them in their heart and in their soul and be able to say, you are loved and you deserve to be happy. And if you're done being miserable, man, we've got a plan that I think you're actually going to be pretty happy with. Your addiction's not going to be happy with it, but you might be.
I remember being at the end of a dead end road, smoking crack and thinking my heart's going to blow up or eating too many pills and feeling like you're going to fade away, and scared to go to sleep, and like just absolute misery, wandering around in the woods at 3:00 in the morning, not knowing where I am or what I was doing and just feeling completely lost and alone and knowing that I was losing my mind and still would not go to the door to the family and say, hey, you know what? I think I'm ready to get well now. For many of us, it's that way. Like we need the family to take the reins. We got to have the family take the reins. And by taking the reins, it doesn't mean you tell them what they need to do. It doesn't mean you tell them what they should do. It means that you educate yourself and get ready for battle. You get trained for battle. You get trained for this journey. You get prepped. You get ready. Just don't wing it. And I'm seeing a lot of folks winging it.
You talked earlier about families who don't get educated. I would rather a family go onto YouTube and Google and learn as much as they can about what their person's going through, even if the sources aren't credible and if the information's not great. I would much rather have a family who comes to me with some ideas that may need to be changed versus somebody coming saying, I know I need to do something, but I don't know what to do. And furthermore, I don't know if I'm willing to do it. They don't usually say that, but they'll show us that in their inability to take action. If we've hurt your feelings today, as we've been talking about this, I hope you've listened to this in the spirit of, we want you to look at this from a different point of view. We're not in the business of hurting people's feelings. We're in the business of changing people's minds. I joke around sometimes with people that, I professionally get paid to get people to do things they don't want to do. I say it jokingly, but the reality is like, that starts with the family. They know there's a problem. I'm going to ask you to do things you don't want to do, but it's because I want to help. And if families can realize, like, I'm going to do things that are uncomfortable, but the end result may be that my loved one lives and is happy. All the other stuff, all the feelings that people are worried about, those get repaired.
You don't want to be in the position of, oh, wish I would have.
Yeah, it reminds me of a family that last year I sat down with them, and as we're sitting there in the coffee shop talking, they decided, okay, we're gonna do this. This young man had been struggling for 10 years. 10 years they'd been watching him, the slow decline into what ultimately ended up being a fentanyl addiction. They decided they were going to do something about it. They went home and found him passed. He was dead. I truly believe that every family's doing the best they can.
Sure.
Every moment. Nobody's dragging their feet maliciously or just because they're lazy or, there's always a reason that we get stuck.
Yeah.
But man, you're right. Those regrets, some of them, I see it. People.
I remember you telling me about that one.
Yeah.
That's tough. That was a tough one.
Yeah.
This has been a good show.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And if you've made it this far, thanks for listening to my raspy voice this whole time. And we'll see you on the next one.
If you're interested in the family support group, go to interventiononcall.com, sit there for about 5 seconds. A pop-up's going to pop up where you can register. You'll get a Zoom link. You can say if you can talk if you want to, be quiet if you want to, show your face or not. It's completely up to you. You are in control. It's a safe place for you to listen, learn, and share. And don't forget to follow us all on our social channels, and we'll see you again.